Throughout the lore-rich history of Naruto, we've been introduced to many characters that have gone down as legendary war heroes due to their participation in one of the major conflicts. In this video, we're going to be discussing the 4 great shinobi wars and then ranking the top 5 strongest combatants that participated in each war. Before we begin, I'd like you to comment who you think the strongest fighter is in each great shinobi war, and I'd also like to give a big shout out to my boy Aries Uzumaki for requesting this topic. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. The 5 great nations emerged from the ashes of the warring states periods and eventually formed shinobi villages that would protect their country. The formation of these shinobi villages would put an end to smaller conflicts and battles throughout the world, but tensions were still pretty high between the nations. Of course, it certainly didn't help that Madara Uchiha himself went to the village hidden in the stones to force the Tsuchikage into submission. So it's heavily implied that the Leaf village was trying to repair their relations with the Stone village, but Madara kinda messed this all up when he told them that they needed to bow to the might of Konoha. Not too long after this, Madara would defect from Konoha and subjugate the Nine Tails to use in his fight against Hashirama. Of course, Hashirama won this fight and proceeded to reclaim the Nine Tails for Konoha, and not too long after this he would call for the first ever 5 Kage summit. During this summit, Hashirama would give away every single tailed beast except the Nine Tails to the other great nations just so he could set up a balance of power. Hashirama's heart was in the right place, but this was still a little bit naive because the other village leaders still seemed to resent Konoha, and this didn't stop the start of the First Great Shinobi War. Now, while we don't know any battles or events that took place during the First Great Shinobi War, we do know that Hashirama either died or passed the title of Hokage to his younger brother, Tobirama Senju. Now, while Tobirama may have been a little bit unfair to the Uchiha living in Konoha, his foreign policy was much better. He attempted to stop the fight between Konoha and the Cloud Village by signing a peace treaty with the second Raikage, but this event was ruined by Kinkaku and Genkaku. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be Tobirama's only encounter with the two brothers, as he would later have to sacrifice his life so his squad could get away from them. Before he died, however, he would make Hiruzen Sarutobi the 3rd Hokage of Konoha. And that's pretty much everything we know about the First Great Shinobi War, but before we start ranking the top 5 strongest participants in this war, I'd like to make an honorable mention for Mito Uzumaki. Mito was the wife of Hashirama Senju and the first ever Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. It's heavily implied that she possessed the same adamantine chains as Kushina did, and she had access to top tier stealing ninjutsu. But anyways, tied for number 5, we have Lord Mu, the 2nd Tsuchikage, and Gengetsu Hozuki, the 2nd Mizukage. Gengetsu and Mu should be pretty relative to each other because they stalemated each other in their death match and ended up killing each other. So while we don't really have any feats for what they did when they were alive, they were very impressive when they were brought back as Edo Tensei during the 4th Great Shinobi War. I've explained all of this in my Edo Kage versus the 6 Paths of Pain video. I suggest you go check it out if you haven't already. It'll give you a lot of insight on why I think these guys are so strong. Anyways, at the number 4 spot, we have Kinkaku and Genkaku. These two are actually a lot stronger than you think. They were able to make the 4th Raikage kinda shit his pants when they were brought back as Edo Tensei. The Raikage stated that no single person in the Shinobi Alliance would be able to defeat Kin or Gin after they transform into their Nine Tails cloaks. Of course, the main reason they're able to wield this Nine Tails chakra in the first place is because they're direct descendants of Hagoromo himself. Of course, Kin and Gin also have access to Hagoromo's sacred treasured tools, which are stated to be above the level of the 5 Kage. Moving on to the number 3 spot, we have Tobirama Senju. Now, some of you might be surprised that I put him above Kinkaku and Genkaku because, he died to them, but let me explain why he doesn't actually have to be weaker than them. Now, we know that Tobirama is the inventor of the Flying Raijin Jutsu, which allows you to instantaneously teleport to a location that you've marked. And we know that Tobirama has markers in the Hidden Leaf Village because he teleported to the monument of himself on Hokage Rock. So why didn't Tobirama just teleport his platoon back to the Hidden Leaf Village instead of sacrificing his life? There's never shown to be any type of distance limit for the Flying Raijin, so I don't see why he couldn't do this unless he was just too fatigued to do it in the first place. This is consistent because we see that everyone in Tobirama's squad is kind of roughed up, so if Tobirama is so fatigued that he can't even perform the Flying Raijin Jutsu, then he wouldn't inherently be weaker than Kinkaku and Genkaku. Of course, Tobirama's feats during the 4th Great Shinobi War just speak for themselves. Even if he is an Edo Tensei, he's very useful during the fight against Jubito, and I've talked about Tobirama several times on the channel already, so if you're interested in more in-depth scaling for Tobirama, be sure to check out those videos. Coming out at number 2, we have Madara Uchiha. Now, while he wasn't a part of the 1st Great Shinobi War, he did play a big part in sowing the seeds of conflict. Like, it's heavily implied that him threatening Lord Mu was what caused the Stone Village to distrust the Leaf Village in the first place, so he is kind of a part of the war. And of course, coming out at number 1, who else but Hashirama Senju himself, the man who literally beat Madara Uchiha while he had the 9 tails at his disposal. Like, there's a reason why he was called the god of shinobi. He's just the strongest person in his time period, hands down. The 2nd Great Shinobi War was likely even more bloody than the first. The 5 great nations were still somewhat crippled from the previous war, and they were left kind of desperate. As a result of this, many smaller countries were caught in the crossfire, such as the Hidden Rain Village. Many families were forced to flee their homes because of the raging battlefield, and many children were left orphaned, such as Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan. The main battle that we see in the 2nd Great Shinobi War is Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade versus Hanzo of the Salamander. This battle was extremely deadly because all of the comrades that followed these 3 into battle were killed, and because they were the only ones that survived, Hanzo christened them the Sannin of Konoha. Because of the large death toll that this war had, Tsunade established a medical ninja corps of Konoha in which she mandated that there be at least 1 medical ninja for every shinobi squadron. Tsunade revolutionized medical ninjutsu and quickly became known as the greatest medical specialist in all of Konoha. Now, moving on to the rankings. In the 5th, 4th, and 3rd spot, we have Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade, but in no particular order. The Sannin became legendary in this war, but they were likely still very far from reaching their prime. It's unknown if Jiraiya even had Sage Mode at this point, and obviously Orochimaru hadn't done nearly enough experimentation yet. And we actually have 2 people tied for the 2nd place spot, being Hanzo of the Salamander and Sakumo Hatsuke, known as the White Fang. Hanzo is heavily implied and even shown to be above the Sannin's level at this point in time, and even Jiraiya considers him to still be a threat later on in Shippuden. However, Sakumo Hatsuke, who is Kakashi's dad, is just blatantly stated to be above the Sannin entirely, and it's possibly stronger versions of the Sannin because it's much later on in the story when this statement is made. But yeah, not much else is known about these guys. If they were to fight, maybe I'd take Hanzo because he has a crazy poison that nobody has any resistance to, but other than that, we just don't know. Now, coming up at the 1st place spot, we have Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage. Now, I'd say it's been about 2 decades since the end of the 1st Great Shinobi War, so it's very likely that Hiruzen was in his prime, the peak of his strength at this point in time. And it is stated that Hiruzen has superlative strength even compared to the previous Hokage like Hashirama and Tobirama. So yeah, Hiruzen definitely deserves to be at the top of this list. I don't see anyone else who could take that title from him. The 3rd Great Shinobi War was arguably as brutal as the last 2 because the Leaf didn't have as much as a decisive advantage against the other nations. Konoha was pretty hard pressed because it was going up against the Cloud Village, the Mist Village, and the Stone Village, which forced them to send literal children into the battlefield like Kakashi, Rin, and Obito. Of course, speedsters like Minato and A would often find each other on the opposite ends of the battlefield, and it's stated that they fought each other multiple times. It was during this war that Minato mastered the Flying Raijin Jutsu to the point where everyone started calling him the Yellow Flash, and he would deal with Stone Shinobi very easily. However, it seems that Minato did neglect some of the responsibilities that were given to him, such as taking care of his squad mates, which resulted in the death of both Obito and Rin. Now, before we get into the actual rankings, I have Hiruzen as another honorable mention because it's very unlikely that he's in his prime at this point in time, but he's also not necessarily weak. Despite his old age, people still thought Hiruzen would have been able to easily defeat Orochimaru if he was only a few years younger, so those statements should apply to this version of Hiruzen. But I already gave him 1st place for the last Shinobi War, so just let him have the honorable mention for this one. Moving on to number 5, we have Jonin A. While he wasn't nearly as strong as he was in Shippuden after he became the Raikage, he was still a formidable opponent. he was actually able to garner respect from Minato. It's stated that they mutually recognized each other as combatants because they had fought each other on equal footing so many times. Now, coming in at number 4, we have Onoki, the third Tsuchikage. His scaling is a little bit weird because Dater just states that he's stronger than he was in his prime during the 4th Great Shinobi War, so it's like, is Onoki weaker now than he is in Shippuden? It's kind of weird. Like, Onoki actually gets stronger as he ages, unlike Hiruzen, but either way, he is still a master of particle release, which can instantly evaporate anything it touches, so he's still incredibly overpowered. In third place, we have Minato Namikaze, the soon-to-be 4th Hokage. It's just blatantly stated that his flying Raijin was able to outspeed A's top speed during this 3rd Great Shinobi War, so it makes sense that Minato is above Jonin A at this point in time. Now, I think it's kind of impossible to prove that Minato got any stronger over the course of his life after the fact, so all of the statements made about Hokage Minato should just apply to Jonin Minato by extension. Like, there are a bunch of statements that consider Minato to have like unparalleled talent and skill, so he would just blatantly scale above the other people that are around at that point in time in the Leaf Village, like Hiruzen and the Sannin. Of course, Hiruzen should still be considered as the strongest of the 5 Kage, so it makes sense that Minato would be above Onoki at this point in time. In second place, however, we have Jonin Killer B. Like, A blatantly admits inferiority to B at this point in time and says that he's more talented than he is, so he just has to be above A. But what a lot of people don't know is that B actually outsped Minato during their skirmish. Like I mentioned, Minato was able to react to A's top speed and teleport to his back while preparing to stab him. Before he can do this though, like, B's tentacle covers a significantly farther distance and pushes A out of the way before Minato can cut him. Since B covered a longer distance in an equal to, if not shorter amount of time, the only explanation would be that he's physically faster than Minato. Also, in the very next chapter, B is able to react to Minato's instantaneous flying Raijin by pulling out his sword as soon as Minato appears behind him. B is also a perfect Jinchuriki at this point, which means he has the ability to form Bijou bombs, which makes him a very big threat to everyone else on the battlefield. Coming out at the number 1 spot, we have the 3rd Raikage A. He actually died during this 3rd Great Shinobi War after facing down against 10,000 ninja for 3 days and 3 nights. However, the main reason why I'm putting him in the number 1 spot is because it's stated that the Raikage is always the strongest person in the village, which means that he would directly scale above Killer B, who scales above everyone else on this list, basically. The 3rd Raikage is just a fucking tank. His durability is actually insane. It's stated that neither Bijou bombs nor Rasen shurikens will have any effect on him. The 4th Great Shinobi War started when the Masked Man invaded the Kage Summit and declared war on all of the nations. His goal was to revive the Ten Tails so he could activate the Infinite Tsukuyomi and send everyone in the entire world into a dreamlike genjutsu. Before he could do this, he still required the 8 Tails and the 9 Tails, and he would stop at nothing to get his hands on them. However, the 5 great nations banded together to form the allied shinobi forces to take on the might of the Akatsuki. However, Kabuto Yakushi, a former apprentice of Orochimaru, offered the Masked Man his help and provided him with Edo Tensei soldiers along with a boost to his White Zetsu army. In reality, the war only lasted like 2 days, but it was still extremely deadly as tens of thousands of shinobi laid down their lives to stop the Akatsuki. As a matter of fact, some of the greatest fights we've ever seen in the entire Naruto franchise came from this war, such as Madara versus the 5 Kage, Itachi and Sasuke versus Kabuto, and Naruto and Sasuke versus Obito. Just a quick disclaimer before we get into the rankings, I will not be including any characters that appeared after Madara absorbed the Ten Tails because at that point in time it wasn't really a war anymore. Like, Naruto and Sasuke fighting Madara, Kaguya, and eventually each other was cool and all, but it wasn't really a war at that point. It was just a few fights or battles that a couple people participated in. But anyways, coming out at number 4 and 5, we have KCM2 Naruto and EMS Sasuke. These two played a very critical role in defeating Jubito and are shown to be relative to each other multiple times. These two are also often compared to Hashirama and Madara by the likes of Tobirama and Orochimaru. It makes sense though, Naruto having access to the full might of Kurama and Sasuke having better dojutsu than that of his older brother is just an unbeatable duo. At the number 3 spot, we have Sage Hashirama. Like, even though he's an Edo Tensei, he's still beating up Madara, who has the Rinnegan and Hashirama cells. Like, it's actually insane. The main reason why I have him above the likes of Naruto and Sasuke is because his wood release is just overpowered in its entirety. It can absorb Bijou Chakra. We've seen how he deals with perfect Susanos. Like, Hashirama is extremely cracked even at this late point in the series. Now, tied for first place, we have Jubito and Revived Sage Madara with the Rinnegan. Now, this placement is pretty controversial, so I didn't want to put one above the other, so like they might as well stay tied for first. Like, the reasoning is that Madara is stated to be the strongest man in the Uchiha clan several times, so it is possible to put him above the likes of Jubito, but that honestly is a topic for another day. Like, if you want to see me turn this into a video, I'd be more than happy to. But yeah, there's no negotiation that these two must be at the top. Like, Madara literally killed both of the main characters and Obito was slamming them for a good majority of the war. Like, it's just no contest. But yeah, let me know what you think about this matchup and every other ranking that I made in this video. I'd like to hear what you have to say. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like on it, and I also hope that you have a great rest of your day. But other than that, I'm gonna catch y'all later. Peace.